Welcome to the Catch Up with Claire. I'm your host, Claire Hoon, and today we are catching up with Dr. Juhi. Juhi is a pediatrician and parent coach and mom of two. She moved to the United States from India for medical school in her 20s. I loved connecting with Dr. Juhi, particularly around hearing the cultural differences from growing up in India versus now she's raising a family in the United States. She shares what it's like practicing medicine in an age where misinformation is rampant and public health is under attack. Juhi also talks with us about the challenges of parenting at different ages and what brought her to become a parent coach. I learned so much from Dr. Juhi, and I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Juhi, welcome to the Catch Up with Claire.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Claire. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
I'm really excited about this, and I'm just going to be totally transparent with our audience here. This is round 2 for us now recording. We just met about 20 minutes ago, had a quick conversation, started recording, and then my kids made a little interruption. And that's the first time this has happened to me, recording with a guest. So I so appreciate your patience and understanding, and we're going to make this recording work.
Yes, no, that's totally cool. Perfectly fine. It happens.
Well, that's what the definition of motherhood. So I appreciate the understanding here. I'm really excited about this conversation from the very high level I have about your background and the story you're going to tell us about who you are today. But you're also one of the very first people who've reached out to me about being on that I don't have a previous relationship with. So I'm curious if you can share, how did you find the Catch Up with Claire?
Yes. First of all, your page is amazing. I love the colors. I love the vibe. And, your conversations are so candid and open-hearted. And I think that's what's needed right now is we need the raw and the rough. We don't need polished and pretty because that's not real life. This is real life. And like you said earlier, that's the definition of motherhood is how can we reach people and add value by showing them that real life is relatable and they're not alone. And I thought that was like the gist of your page. So that's why I decided to reach out.
Okay, I can't tell you how much it actually means to me to hear that feedback. That's, in a couple sentences, the exact goal of why I started all of this. It is also a little bit daunting for me to put something out there that I feel like, yes, the conversations are raw and real and relatable, and I absolutely want to keep that as the integrity of the conversations. But I am an absolute newbie at podcasting in general and the audio quality and the visuals. I'm trying to improve and learn and get better at all of that. I, worked and to make the colors and the branding look consistent and appealing. But really, like you said, sort of the raw and real and candid is what I'm trying to capture. And I think part of why I'm excited about this conversation today, I think there are so many multitudes in which women exist in the experience of womanhood. A lot of times, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I find that once you become a mom is your definition. And yes, being a mom and a mother is a huge part of my identity, but I'm still Claire. I'm still a professional. I'm still a daughter, a friend, a wife. I have all of these hobbies. There's still so many more pieces to me. And from what I know about you and seeing some of the things you put out there, you as well. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Always excited about, when two moms chat together, coming from different walks of life. I think that just is something magical about it. And so many moms, so many women are gonna, relate to it and hopefully find value and not feel alone. Because sometimes motherhood can be alone. It's a lonely feeling. It seems like, oh, my child is the only child having tantrums. Well, no, there is multiple moms dealing with tantrums in a Target aisle as we speak. And so we all need support. We just need a shoulder. And our family is there for us, but sometimes it's not the same sort of wavelength when we're talking to our spouses. And so platforms like yours are so valuable. And no matter if you're a newbie or if you're experienced, I think help is always needed. And that's what you're doing. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I'm excited to get into this. Here is what I think I know about you. You're from India. You're a pediatrician. a parent coach, a mother. That's what I have been able to gather from following you online. Juhi, introduce yourself in your own words for our audience.
Yes, I am a physician and I trained in India, and I had never thought as I was training that I would leave my country and come to the United States. But as I was training and I made up my mind to kind of embark on this journey, I had no idea what I was getting into whatsoever. I have grown so much and evolved so much from the little girl who I'm calling myself little because that was 20 years ago, from the this young little girl who came to the United States to now. And I think as women, we kind of, wear different hats, but we don't realize how much we're doing as we're doing these things. We're just like, yeah, this is kind of what I was born to do. And some of it is our upbringing. Some of it is what we see around us, but it makes me feel proud of like the person that I have become and I am continuing to become. And I define myself as a lifelong learner and, trying not to be in a certain mold, always kind of looking for the next thing, which can be good or bad because sometimes you could burn yourself out with that. But I think that's the key, is to not burn yourself out and continue to grow without pressure.
So much for us to talk about here. I
Yeah.
can so appreciate, especially the aspect about being a lifelong learner. I actually relate to some of that. And part of what I think gleaned satisfaction from is learning something new, the podcasting, the Instagram. I've always been a consumer of social media. I think you're not often put in an environment as an adult to learn new things. And I think it can also be scary because I think as we're just have this expectation, or at least I did, that as we get older, we'll continue to get better at things we already know. And I didn't realize how much I actually miss learning something new that I don't know anything about, albeit very frustrating because I like to feel like I know things, and this is
Mm.
probably human nature. I think there's something about what you said about being a lifelong learner that, continues to pique that curiosity and I don't know, fills my cup in a way. I want to go back to the beginning. So you grew up in India and you moved to the United States after medical training?
Yes. So I did my medical school in India,
Okay.
and then I came to the States for my residency program. So I trained as a pediatrician, and I did my program in New Jersey. So right around where you live.
Yeah, in New York City. What was that like? I mean, was coming to the United States to practice always a goal? Was it something that, as you got further into your training that, you found an opportunity and so sort of jumped after it? I'm curious about all of it, even just the cultural aspect. I've never moved to another country. I've lived in other parts of the country, and the cultural shock feels like a heavy word. But I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. I lived in the South for school, and then I moved to the East Coast in New York City, all culturally very, very different places in the United States. I cannot fathom moving across the world. So I'm curious about sort of all of these aspects of it, of, how it came to be for you.
Yeah, no, I get that a lot. And it's, now in retrospect, it seems like a lot to me. As I was going through my medical training and I saw an opportunity, I wanted to take up on it. And it required a lot of work. It required a lot of extra studying, understanding what the steps look like, taking the test, going around the country all by myself for interviews, which was really daunting. I mean, first of all, figuring out like what a credit score is and how to build it and how to even get a cell phone when you're like traveling around the country. It was just, every step was a challenge. Every step was, it was a new thing. It was really scary at times. Sometimes it was exciting. And, it goes for a lot of our South Asian physicians who kind of do their medical school and then come in for training in the United States. We come from very protected homes,
Mm.
very homes like I've never even stepped in my kitchen in my mom's house. It was just about, focus on your career, focus on your studies, or it was just fun. It was never like because we just have help around there in those countries, and we're not used to doing our own work. So coming from that kind of protection to all of a sudden figuring everything out was like huge. I did have a group of friends, support group, which, we all kind of came together. So that helped. And, I had met my husband by then. So he was already here. So that was a big support for me. But there were
You met him,
others.
you met him in India and he had already moved here, or you met him when you moved to the United States?
So we have an arranged marriage, which I know
Oh,
is kind of like a foreign concept, for basically everyone here. But we did meet online, but it was kind of arranged by our parents. And then we dated for a while, but he was here and I was there. And then so we online dated, and then when I came here for my interviews, then I had met him once in India, and then I met him again here, and then we continued to date, and then eventually got married. So yeah, that's a whole nother interesting
yeah. We might have to
topic.
circle back to that. Was he also a physician?
Yes, he's a physician as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had some support built in though when you came to the United States, it sounds like, not
Yes.
totally alone.
Yes. Yes. But not as much as, I was used to back
Yeah.
home, obviously. Yeah. And then I did my interviews and then landed on the residency program in New Jersey. And then a very surprising thing happened is that I had my daughter in my second year of residency, which was a pleasant surprise, but it was just a lot during residency. And in those days, we used to do overnight calls. So I would sleep whatever little sleep I would get. I would sleep on the couch in the call room. It would be working for 30 straight hours and then going home and then only getting like 4 weeks of maternity leave. But it was like leave, but it wasn't really leave because I had to extend my residency by couple of weeks because of that. So yeah, I mean, a lot happened in the first 3 years.
That is a lot. I also had a surprise pregnancy right after I finished graduate school. We moved to New York for my graduate school program, intended to write out our lease, which we had another 14 months or so on. And then we're going to move back to New Orleans, which is where we met and got married, and ended up getting pregnant about 4 months after I graduated and never left New York. So I, however, am not in the medical field. I am not in a demanding career like that, a different type of demand. But what was that like? I mean, I'm also curious, sort of, again, from what you grew up with in India. And, I'm curious to tap into some of the things you talked about with, in the United States, we don't have paid leave. We don't have protected leave for birthing people. I work for a company where we have 12 weeks of paid leave. I know in New York State, you can also get 12 weeks of paid leave at a reduced income at 60% of your base salary. So there are states, that differ in what they're able to offer to people. When you're in the type of career that you are, I heard you say, you could take the 4 weeks, but you then had to extend by 4 weeks. I mean, 4 weeks were not even cleared yet
Yeah.
from our OBGYN. How did you manage all of that?
Yeah, it was basically, it was a Herculean task, and it was you just feel so like helpless and unsupported. But residency programs, they don't really follow. I mean, you're not like you get a stipend. You're not really, an employee because you're training. And so it was, I mean, I don't know, when you're new to the country, you're on a visa. You're not a
Yeah.
permanent resident, so it's not like you can just take time off. You have to kind of meet these guidelines, and or you would have to leave the country. And so there's just a lot of things that you don't know, and a lot of things, the ones that are kind of scary. So you just kind of follow along, you just do your thing, and you're in the survival mode. And being that my husband is also a physician, it's really hard in two physician households to raise kids. I mean, let alone having a baby during residency, but like even afterwards, I wouldn't see my husband for like a couple of weeks, because if he's doing nights and I'm doing days, and if we're just switching, you want to be there for the baby. You want to be there as much as possible, but then somewhere you're going to have to compromise. And then we had support from my in-laws who were visiting, and they would come in for a few months at a time and they would try to help and things like that. But again, you just don't know what you don't know, and you just kind of move along, try to do your best.
I was going to ask about childcare. At 4 weeks old, most daycares, if you're lucky, start at 6 weeks. But even from the two physician household, juggling, you have a baby now. I heard you say your in laws came and helped. How did you manage the childcare early on?
Yeah, so my in-laws did help me, and then my mom visited for some time, and then we did have to, my in-laws were in Canada at that time, and they could also come only for some time, so we did for periods of times we had to leave our daughter with them in Canada, and then we would visit like later on as when she got a little bit older. So we managed that for a few months until my residency was done. And then I was able to stay home with her for some time to just kind of recuperate. But when you're going through that, as I look back, it was really, and I didn't realize this in the moment because I was such a young and new mom, but I was having a hard time bonding with her because I didn't have enough time. It was just like always a rush, always the next thing. And so your mind and body are not relaxed. You're just always in stress mode because you're just in the giving mode all the time, which is not healthy at all. And so I did a lot of work on myself afterwards and healing and, praying and a lot of like introspection. And because but it started with blaming myself. Like I just kept
Mm.
on blaming myself for not doing enough, for not giving enough. Even though I was doing the best I could, I just wasn't able to do as much as, a mom who was staying at home or a mom who could take time off for 12 weeks would. And so that guilt was always with me. And I had to really go through a healing process to overcome that. And it took me a while to do that. And it took me a lot of like giving up on my career for a little bit to just focus on motherhood and then restart again. And then when I had my son, which was about 4.5, 5 years later than my daughter, I had told myself that I'm going to get as much support as possible. I'm going to hire as much support as possible. I'm going to take as much time off as possible. So I had like already sort of done this self-talk, and I did, follow through with all of that. So I didn't have to go through that same type of guilt. Even though I took 12 weeks off and went back to work and everything after him, but it was just like the whole negative self talk that I had to deal with after my daughter was very traumatic.
I can relate to so much of what you're saying. And I think it's also, I don't want to use the word interesting, but I think as women and as moms, especially the disservice we do to ourselves and that self talk of, I hear you saying, I wanted to do more. I wanted to be more present. I wanted more time. I didn't do enough. All I hear you saying is, Juhi, you were doing everything. I mean, you gave birth, and 4 weeks later, you were going back to work to be present for the career that you had committed to, for the life coming here. You were having support with your in laws. You were making sure that your daughter was always cared for. I mean, to me, I just hear how much love, but I could picture myself being in that position and feeling like, no, not seeing it that way too. And so I just feel like we, as women and moms, just do such a disservice to ourselves.
Yeah.
But then again, like, I just want to reframe that for you from like what I hear is like, oh my gosh, what an act of love for your daughter and getting through that time for yourself. I remember postpartum with my first, and I had a very severe struggle with postpartum depression, had a really hard time bonding, but I didn't even recognize that I wasn't bonding with him because it just felt like this biological instinct. I was like, I just have to protect the baby. And to me, as I said, it was a surprise pregnancy. Like, I was terrified of raising a child in New York City. Like, the cost of living alone here, the cost of
Yeah.
school, the cost of apartments, just everything. And I had just graduated from graduate school, going into a career where I was essentially starting over, which I ended up deciding not to go into at all, which is, again, a whole nother story. But I was just
Yeah.
like, the only way I can actually provide for this baby is by going back to work. But then I don't even get to spend any time with this baby because I have to go back to work. And it's just this whole guilt trip that
Yeah.
spirals. It sounds like, though, you were really able to finish residency, take some time with yourself, with your baby, and prepare for when you had your son a couple years later. Did you find that that was better or more positive experience for you round two?
Yes, yes, for sure. I always say that, and it's just natural that even though you have 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, every kid is going to get a different version of you. The first kid is going to get a different version of you as the second and the third and the fourth, because you are also growing as a person. You know more. By then I had more time in the country. I mean, when you step into the country, you don't know which store to go to for groceries. Like, you don't know. And I grew up a vegetarian. So in those days, the choices weren't as open as they are now. The awareness wasn't as open as they are now. So, like, every step of the way, you're just like figuring out it's something new, let alone leaving the city or the town after your 3 years of training, because now you're moving on to the next training or the next job. By the time you figure out like the streets and the stores and the drive, it's time to move. And that's another piece of like, it's people always ask me about am I military? I'm pretty close to being a military family because I have moved 8 times in the
Wow.
last, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's pretty close to being in the military, but I'm not sure. But moving is one of the biggest changes. Having a baby is one of the biggest changes. Marriage. These are huge things that are life changing. And I think emotional regulation was never taught or discovered by me, at least by me, until like very recently. But, so it's like you do what you do in the moment, but then I think rest and recovery and restoration are so important. At some point, your body's going to give out. At some point, your body's just going to be like, okay, no more. I can't do it.
I'm curious through all of the moves. I mean, we've moved 7 times in the same city.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine, the moves across the country and just different areas here. I'm curious how you, especially as an immigrant and not growing up in the United States, sort of find or create a sense of home or community. Something I've struggled with myself is New York is a very transient city, and it's kind of like either you grew up here and you're a real New Yorker, or you're a transplant and not that you're trying to be a real New Yorker, but you're trying to
Yeah.
figure out how long can I hang on? Am I hanging on for a while longer? Do I plant roots and invest in the relationships and the friendships? And then also a lot of people leave because again, it is just an expensive place to raise a family.
Expensive.
And so it's something, even inspiration behind starting this podcast is creating a sense of community. And, a lot of what we do these days is virtual and connecting through social media and across the globe, even we find people. But I'm curious how you've been able to sort of, what's been a sense of home for you? Is it with your family, with your husband? Is it, connecting to people that you grew up with back home? Is it things you do in your local community where you are? I'm curious, anything you can share around that?
Yeah, no, that's such an interesting question. And, as I look back, I have built relationships everywhere I have lived. I still have friends in all the towns and cities that we lived in. And whether it was a small town in the Midwest or big city like we were in Phoenix, we were able to find a community that was small or big, but that held us together. And that is something I really appreciated about, the United States, because sometimes even back home, like you could feel more isolated than when you actually leave the country, because you do find people who are kind of in the same boat as you. And so you do, have the same struggles, you have the same conversations, maybe the same age kids. And so I feel, when I say I moved so many times, I used to be resentful. And I used to be like, this was just so much work. Was it really necessary to do it? But as I look back and I reflect on this, I am so grateful and so thankful for this experience because I have an enriched life and my kids are so much richer because of the experiences they've shared, the surroundings that they've lived in. They are able to communicate so much better because they're able to make new friends every few years. Like my daughter switched, I think, 3 elementary schools in total, like up to 5th grade already. She had 3 different schools in different states. And even she says the same thing. She's a high school senior this year, and she says the same thing. It formed her in many ways where living in one place may not have given her the same experience. So we are really grateful and thankful for the opportunities that we got. And a sense of community, begins at home, but you can always find it. And nowadays it's more available virtually too, like you're, doing such a great job with it. I think that kind of sparked after COVID. But before COVID, it was more personal. So, in whatever shape or form, we can find a community. And that's kind of my mission too when I'm doing my coaching work outside of my physician job, because I, have been a physician for almost 20 years now, but the the service that I can provide as a physician was in my clinic in between the 4 walls. And I realized that something more was needed.
I am curious to hear about sort of the journey of physician and parent coach, also just an education for me on sort of differences between physician and parent coach and how you sort of integrate those two worlds for yourself.
So, yes, so I get this a lot, being a physician and a parent coach. I definitely get this a lot. Like, what are you doing now? Have you left your physician job? Are you just doing parent coaching? What is parent coaching? All really great questions. And the transition between the physician and the coach is a physician is a person who will, diagnose a problem, provide a solution, provide the support that's needed, and then let you, be. And the solution that they provide is going to help you feel better. A coach, a parent coach, or any kind of coach is a person who guides you and supports you, but lets you find the answers within yourself. So the coach is not really providing the answer for you. The answer is still within you. The coach is a lighthouse, a guide for you to help you kind of navigate certain situations in your life. Parent coaching is something that is relatable to being a pediatrician, not only helping the patients, the kids that I'm seeing in my office, but I am talking to the moms and the dads that are coming in with my patients. And I saw the need of, yes, treating the patient. Of course, I'm going to do that. That is my profession. But I saw the missing link of when a parent comes in to my door. Sometimes medically, I'm not able to find anything on my exam. I'm not able to really prescribe anything. But the parent is worried. And the empathy that I'm able to provide as a coach kind of help them navigate that tough situation when they're dealing with the guilt or dealing with the second guessing or dealing with anything that's environmental, like so and so said something, or about vaccines or just news. And all those things kind of come in the realm of a coach, which I'm not able to do that as a physician because that's not medical.
I see. I guess a clarifying question. Are you practicing as a pediatrician and a parent coach now at the same time?
Yes. So, yes, I am
So
practicing as a physician 3 days a week and then a parent coach 2 days a week.
I'm curious what it's like in sort of the current environment where medicine is becoming very political, in the environment in which we live, and things that, at least for me growing up, were formerly known as facts, or
Yeah.
sort of evidence-based medicine, and it's just very politicized these days. And I'm curious, in your experience as a physician, what it's like and sort of how you've seen things change in your 20 plus year career, um, in how medicine is practiced because of, again, the way that politics have entered medicine. And I'll just, for example, with ourselves, I am not medically trained. I never questioned vaccines or, getting our kids vaccinated. And even for myself, always just followed what our standard pediatrician protocol was. Actually, I will say, I will amend that a bit. I never questioned it before I had kids. And then when we went to our first pediatrician visit, they hand you, like, this is the standard what's it called, the schedule of vaccines for
Yeah.
kids, and they have to give you the sheet that has, why we vaccinate, what the risks are, what potential outcomes could be. And I remember reading through it and being like, oh my gosh, this is actually really scary. Should we vaccinate? And I texted my cousin, who's a nurse, and she was like, and I was like, you have 3 kids, like, make me feel normal about this. Like, should I delay something? Like, is there something I should do? And she was like, well, the reason that we have doctors is because they go to medical school and learn all of this. And if your doctor is recommending it, like, yes, and there's all this evidence to support. And she was like, and I think it was measles, the example she used was the risk of what could happen from getting measles far outweighs getting the vaccine. And we wouldn't be giving vaccines if they weren't proven effective. And so her just sort of reframe of that for me was like, oh, yeah, of course, they have to tell me this because there is some
Right.
minute risk, but the reward or the protection far, far, far outweighs the risk. But I'm curious. And then there's shows like, what was the show that just came out? It was an ER show, but it was
Yeah.
basically how they're the main doctor had someone come, and their son, who was a high school student, was very sick. And he was like, we have to give him this medicine. And the mom was basically saying, no, that's not safe. I'm going off on a tangent now, but the question is, I'm curious just how politicized medicine has come under in recent years, really, in my observation since the pandemic, in your experiences practicing in the medical field, what you've noticed or what you observed or how you dealt with that.
Yeah, no, that's such an important question in today's day and age. And it's something that's honestly heartbreaking for me because
Mm.
I have grown up in a developing country and I've firsthand seen some of these diseases, and there were no vaccines at that time back home. So when I got here and I saw that there was all these vaccines that were being provided, they were readily available. There was refusal, say 5 years ago for vaccines, but the refusal rates are much higher now. And it's just hard as a physician, and I know I speak for many physicians when I say this, is that we are researching and we are making so much progress in the world. But then the vaccines that have been there for so many years provided benefits to preventing all these diseases, which can be not only crippling, but life-threatening. And we knowingly refuse the vaccines is such an irony. And it's just hard to sometimes make sense of, first of all, okay, yes, I'm okay with any objections, any fears, anything like that. But I would like to have an open conversation and come up with a plan. And sometimes when parents walk in, they already kind of ended that discussion. Like there is no further discussion. And I feel like that can sometimes be a little blindsiding you because as a physician, as a professional, I would like to get a chance to have a discussion about it. And in the end, if you would like to refuse it, that's fine because it's your child and, you make the decisions. But that's the piece that is, hurting more than ever in the current environment because vaccine refusals have always been there. It's just that they're on the rise and the discussions are going down. And so now there's this gap.
Do you find that you get patients, or I guess parents of patients, coming in and looking for guidance of, "Hey, I saw this or I read this and I'm nervous about it. Can you educate me?" Or is it more the crowd of, we've done our own research and we've made this decision and don't want to be educated or counseled through sort of talking? Like, what do you find that people are there still people, I guess, give me hope, that are open-minded to, having the conversation?
Yeah, so I get both. I get both types of parents. I always make it very clear that I am willing to see non-vaccinators because I want to provide the care for the child, because outside of the vaccines there's many other things that we need to check and make sure. But I do ask that they are willing to have a discussion with me about what the reason is behind them not vaccinating. Most of the parents are willing to have the discussion in my practice. Occasionally, there would be some who have already had other kids and are now just kind of gone through the whole process already and have decided to not vaccinate. Because of the continuous discussions that we're having with every visit, would maybe more open to like a delayed schedule or a modified schedule, which in my eyes is a win because something is better than nothing.
Yep. I'm curious how you integrate the world now into the parent coaching. When did you decide, hey, I want to add this skill set or this sort of offering? I heard you say a couple minutes ago when we started the conversation around the medicine, kind of more or less is black and white. You come in with a complaint or for your checkup, and there's this protocol. I diagnose or prescribe, and that's that. It sounds like, in what I'm hearing, but you'll tell me, the parent coaching allows for a little bit more expansion, a little bit more looking at the full context of, sure, maybe a child or a parent has this complaint or ailment and I can't diagnose anything, but what are the other factors that could be at play? Curious how you sort of arrived at the coaching to be the solution to that.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. I basically, what happened was I was myself having a hard time connecting with my tween and turning into a teen. And so every time I would try to do my best, being patient, just kind of offering my 2 cents in a very polite voice. Just no matter what I did, it just was not landing. And I was just coming to a point where I was just like, there is a better way than this. And in the digital age, it's becoming harder for us to parent because we don't have any framework. We were parented in a non-digital age. I
Hmm.
was parented in a non-digital
Hmm.
age. And so it's harder to kind of set boundaries. And when you're a working parent, you always feel like you're not giving enough time. And then it circles back into the guilt spiral. And then you give in. So you're either permissive or you're just too strict, and it's just you're juggling between like how to like find this balance where you can teach the child your values, but you're also not harsh and you're also not resorting to yelling. And so I was just like listening to a podcast on one of my car rides, and the guest was a parent coach, but she was also a pediatrician.
Mm.
And so when I listened to the conversation, I was just like, this is me. Like, I identified so much with her. And then I went out and got a certification in parent coaching. And the way it was structured was I had to get coached first as a parent, and
Mm.
then they coached me how to become a parent coach. And so through that journey, I was able to transform my relationship with my kids. And then when I discovered that this is such a transformative approach to parenting, I didn't want to keep it to myself. So I started kind of offering it to my friends and family, and they were all getting great results. And so from there, decided to demand it and offer it to clients.
Do you focus? I heard you say you started getting into it when your children were sort of in the preteen, tween ages. Do you focus primarily on teenagers, or do you also use your parent coaching for younger kids, like toddlers or young kids?
So, my group coaching program is primarily for parents of teenagers. And then my one on one coaching programs is for all age group kids. Because I feel like in a group coaching setting, a lot of the things that the teenagers are going through and the parents are going through with them is more of a cohort that I've set up. but in future, I am going to get more groups started with like different age groups so that there's more relatability.
I feel like I'm learning about something I didn't know existed. I will admit I am highly influenceable. Like if I see something that someone posts online, I'm like, oh yeah, I need that. Like I'm glad.
Yeah.
I early on, I mean, especially during the pandemic, my son was 18 months when the pandemic hit, and there were all of these parenting resources coming out, but from, and I don't want to diminish anyone's, background, but like they didn't have any
Yeah.
qualifications or background. They just like, "Oh, this method worked for me, now I'm going to sell that as a course because it worked for my own child." And one, I'm guilty of not researching or looking to be like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. But I think there's comfort in a course or a group or coaching when there's a professional, you have medical training and being a physician and working as your day job with children and parents all day long. That these are sort of the voice behind the coaching, to me feels more informed and reliable rather than, again, someone without any qualifications or being able to talk with a backing behind what they're trying to work with.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's social media is kind of free for all, but I am speaking from my own experience, and that's what I bring into my coaching programs. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. I always say, like, being a physician is my profession and passion, but being a coach is like my purpose because I want to serve the moms and help the moms because I was there. I was struggling myself. Did not know how to like keep the doors open. It was, we had an argument and the door was shut. And then I'm behind the shut door. I'm just feeling guilty and a bad mom. I did not know how to like circle back from there, how to like get up and repair my relationship. And those are such important things that I don't think anybody teaches. We learn from how we were parented, and nothing against our parents, nothing against the caregivers, but it's just that they were doing the best they knew about as we evolve and as we're growing. And I mean, if we can do better, then that's the goal. It's not perfection. The goal is not perfection. It's just progress. Just, a lot of times I hear like my teens shut down. They don't trust me. They don't want to hear my advice. Like they're always on their phones. These are real problems in today's world in all the homes around us. And if we can do something about it, we can kind of add a drop of hope or navigate in those situations or kind of guide the parents with what we know what has worked for so many other parents, then that will make them feel less alone. And I think that's really beautiful.
I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and honest about your own experience of parenting. I think it can be really hard as a parent in general, especially with a social media presence, to know sort of what should I say, what can I say, wanting to be protective of our own children. But then it also kind of, in a way, creates this further disconnection of like, I can't really talk about what I'm really going through because, there's the child privacy and that in play. I have such respect for what doctors and medical professionals do of like, well, they have it all figured out. And it's nice to hear,
Yeah.
we all have our challenges and, with our
Yeah.
children. And I so appreciate what you've been sharing with us. I think there's many parents, I hope, that are listening that can be educated like I just have been around the option of a parent coach and that there's, a more encompassing story and support to be found outside of just our wellness checks and our sick visits with the pediatricians.
Yeah, no,
I
thank you. And I just wanted to offer this to the audience too. If they followed me on Instagram, which I know you're going to put down in the show notes, I can send them a free guide it's called a Teen Parenting Playbook. And it's got like the exact scripts and tools and stories around gentle parenting and how to keep those doors open with your teens.
Well, that's so nice. I will definitely make sure that when we're sharing everything out, that resource will be included. That's really nice. Thank you. Before we wrap up, there are two subjects that I do want to circle back to, and they're related but also unrelated. One, I'm curious, and it's been on my mind, hearing that you and your husband both grew up in India, moved to the United States as young adults, are now raising your family here in the United States. I'm curious around, excuse me, some of those cultural differences and, how you grew up versus how you're seeing and raising your children here. What from your upbringing are you sort of keeping and trying to protect and, sort of, I use the word, family values or family traditions that are either uniquely Indian or that your husband and you share, what you're incorporating from, we'll say, Americanized culture or life here. I'm curious what that's like for you. And I mean, just from my own upbringing, I didn't grow up in New York. I grew up in the Midwest. I alone find differences. And so again, I can imagine that it's very different. Like you said a couple minutes ago, growing up in a developing country versus a developed country. I'm curious how that's influenced family life, parenting style, you and your own identity as a mom. Anything you can share about that?
Yeah, no, that's such relevant question specifically to me and my journey, and I think that's helpful to hear. And I love to share this because, when I was first became a mom, and in the first few years I was just always struggling because it was like a tug of war between this is how it's done over there, but no, but this is how it's done over here.
Mm.
And what I realized was that I was putting so much pressure on my kids, just kind of, trying to give this message across to them. And then we sat down, me and my husband, and we decided that we're not going to, literally put this pressure on the kids, but we are going to gently keep the cultures and the traditions alive by, keeping them involved in it and also focusing on raising really kind and resilient kids versus like worrying about like exactly what they're wearing or exactly what they're, these are all like external factors. It's really important for us to keep a close-knit relationship. To me, it's not as important if they are loving to wear Indian clothes or not. Like I'm much more relaxed about it than I was, but I'm not gonna lie, it was definitely a struggle in the initial few years. It is something that I think a lot of Southeast Asian families struggle with in the United States. What I've tried to teach my kids is they are enriched and they come from a very rich history and rich culture, and it's something that is always going to work in their favor, not the opposite. We're trying to blend in, all the time.
Mhm.
But everybody's unique in their own ways. And so if the kids feel confident and not like controlled, if you approach them with curiosity and you kind of nudge them instead of like telling them and pushing them in that direction, then they're always going to stay curious and they're always going to want to learn more about their culture and their background that they're coming from. It's when we really push them in a corner to do something and then give them no choices is when they push back, and then it results into a power struggle.
What are you saying is, it's important because it's your culture and your family values and
Yeah.
what you both grew up with, but wanting it to be appreciated and not forced. So sort of offering and sort of living it through your own life and by example, so that hopefully they can see and
Yeah.
appreciate what you're providing for them and choose to continue with it and make it more a part of their life. It's something, I mean, my very, very different. My husband grew up without religion and I came from a very Catholic family. And so trying to balance the line of wanting to give them again choice, but also provide them with the faith values that I grew up with and I value, but also not wanting to force anything. It's hard, especially when they're
It's hard.
young, when they're like, I don't want to go to church. This is boring.
Yeah.
And I want to be like, well, you have to because it's Sunday, even though I know that's not necessarily. It's like, what's the balance of this is something we're going to do as a
Yeah.
family and help them appreciate they can take what is meaningful to them and then choose to not and make their own decisions when they're older. It's something I struggle with. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. No, it's hard. It's not easy.
I'm also curious, going back to the beginning. So, something that has come up in conversations with women that episodes have already aired and ones that I also will have in January when this comes out. Love and dating and marriage. And I heard you say you and your husband had an arranged marriage. So I've talked with women who are married, who are single, who are dating, who are on dating apps, someone who's already divorced, and the experience of that. I've not yet met someone who's had an arranged marriage, and I'm curious if you're comfortable sharing about that. I'm curious if you're open to sharing some more about what an arranged marriage means and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, so I think the definition of arranged marriage has changed since like my mom and dad got married to like when I got married. In those days, it was just kind of like a meeting and it was like, okay, maybe go out a couple times and then decide to get like the families kind of decide and they get married. In my case, and kind of like around when I got married, and now it's fading even more. Like now it's just like here, back home is just same. But going back to the arranged marriage, it wasn't like arranged in the sense like, here's the guy, here's the girl, and you have to get married to this person. It was like, well, the family seems nice. It seems like a good match. Why don't you go and meet the person and see what you think? So it was more like kind of a direction than a push towards
So
it or like a strict
it, it's more
thing.
like vetted.
Yeah.
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 I feel like
Exactly.
there's something to that. And I don't think my mom's going to listen to
Yeah.
this, but I think she would jump at the opportunity to vet or arrange marriages for my two
Yeah.
sisters. But I do think, I mean, I
Yes.
have so many girlfriends and sisters who are single, and it's a very hard to find someone
It's
that
hard.
you're compatible with, that you want the same things out of life, that I mean, I feel so grateful. My husband and I met in college and we just kind of stuck together. And I think there's also a lot of, I don't know, misperceptions about
Yeah.
marriage too, about it's all going to be like it was when you were first dating. And I think, there's
Yeah.
something to you're committing to a relationship, and every relationship has ups and downs, and people are going to grow in that relationship, both together and apart. And the challenge of coming back to each other at times. I think we're sold, sort of the Disney princess version of marriage when we're
Yeah.
young, at least sort of what I grew up with. And so you think, oh, I'm just going to find someone and we're going to have a great, first year of dating, fall in love, get
Yeah.
married. But I think there's something to, matching with someone where if you can agree that you have the same core values, that you're both putting your best foot forward and working and committing to each other, that it's not always going to be the best day, and there's going to be hard times, but committing to working that out together. I appreciate you sharing that experience with us.
Yeah. No, happy to share.
There is so much that I wanted to talk with you about. You've been so open. I really appreciate the journey. So I so appreciate that you reached out to me. I appreciate everything you shared today. Juhi, it's been really nice chatting with you and getting to know you. Um, and also thank you for the resource that you offered to share with the audience here. I know parents will benefit from that.
No, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time. This was like one of the most vulnerable and candid conversations I've had, and I'd look forward to part two.
Well, thank you for joining us today. It was so nice chatting with you, and we'll talk soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Catch Up with Claire. If you did, I would so appreciate if you subscribe, follow, rate, and comment wherever you're listening from. Share it with someone else you think might enjoy listening. This is how I can continue to have these conversations and bring these conversations to you. Until next time, be kind, be brave, and be safe out there.